Okay, this is my next wall painting. This one's cat-themed, but specifically Cats the Musical. The first time I saw it was the first time I ever watched any kind of live music or dancing performance. It was my grandma who got me and my mom the tickets, but originally I didn't want to go since it sounded very loud and stressful and overstimulating, but the experience was absolutely magical as a child. But much to my frustration, the details of the night are actually pretty blurry. I remember it was dinner and a show, and I find it kind of nerve-wracking because the buffet was actually on the stage and you had to go down to it to get the food. And I remember not liking that, but I also remember it was the first time I ever saw or tried red potatoes. I was very young, probably 9 or 10, and I'd only ever seen the brown ones. And it's annoying that I can remember the stress and anxiety from before and during the show, but not the actual show itself. But one thing I do remember was getting a white stuffed animal cat from the gift shop, because it reminded me of my own childhood cat ragdoll named Annabelle. It was during the halfway break. And another thing I remember is the performers popping up in the stands next to the audience, and they would pop up with a spotlight on them right next to you. And one of them came right up to my table. I think the actor for Victoria, the white cat, and pretended my stuffed animal was a real fellow cat and interacted with it. And despite being shy and having awkward interactions with mascots and performers in the past, I loved it. Probably because all the attention was on the little stuffed cat instead of myself. But since I don't remember the actual show very well, I always wanted to go to another performance of it again at some point, and I was supposed to be able to go to one in 2020, but we all know how that year ended up. And speaking of, that time frame was a bad time for the Cats IP in general, because that's when the CGI Abomination came out. And my grandma was also the one to show me that. And she and I were very excited, only for the end product to be just a disaster. I was gonna say lackluster, but no, it was definitely a very interesting and amusing disaster in just how bad it actually went wrong. And it's a shame because Steven Spielberg was actually gonna make a hand-drawn animated movie for the Cats musical, but if I remember correctly, Andrew Lloyd Webber said he felt the animation wouldn't capture the majesty of live dance as well. But the 2019 one is anything other than majestic. But I actually feel like animation could make the fluid movements and dancing even more beautiful and free-flowing, since you're no longer restricted to physics and what the performers are actually capable of. But a different cat movie does exist, almost just as a higher production performance and recording of the musical. I used to watch it on repeat on YouTube, and then for my birthday got my own DVD and obsessively rewatched that instead. I would even follow along with the dances for each song, usually mimicking Victoria, because it was another job that I wanted to be when I was younger, a dancer for Cats the Musical. But that was before I realized I would absolutely freak out being on stage in front of others. Now I always felt too awkward to show my family the 1998 movie, similar to how I felt about Warrior Cats, only the questionable content wasn't violence, but a very uncomfortable sexual tension over the entire movie. And though I felt uncomfortable with it, I never thought too much about it and would just skip those parts, but I knew it was weird. But I guess it didn't mess me up that much being exposed to that kind of stuff, because I'm asexual now and have an aversion to all that touchy-feely stuff anyways. And apparently that aversion goes back to a time before I even had the talk. I would say I'm getting off topic again, but sexuality and Cats the Musical kinda go hand in hand, not just because of the weird undertones, but because I swear there is a gay canon relationship that is hinted at. But I did used to make up my own little stories and headcanons about these characters a lot, so I could just be projecting, but I think other people have pointed it out too. That Mr. Mistopheles, the magic cat, and the cat who all the ladies fawn over have something going on. I also like the idea that Victoria and Mr. Mistopheles were siblings, so the fact the 2019 movie made them love interest felt wrong for multiple reasons. I feel like I have the curse of death for IPs I like. First with Cats, then with Dragon Age Veilguard, and then with Zoochosis. Whenever I look forward to something releasing, it goes wrong at some point in development. The maker of the musical, Andrew Lloyd Webber, is kind of a big deal, not only in just making Cats, but also Phantom of the Opera and School of Rock for some reason. which I also saw performed live in New York when I was a teenager and also really enjoyed. It's funny, the only 2 live performances of a musical I've ever been to have been written by this guy. The makeup for the musical has always been something I found interesting. I appreciated the artistic effort that went into that. I remember hearing somewhere it was made to look like a cat, but not so much that you forget it's a human. I always liked that they didn't really look like they were wearing kitty cat ears on a headband or something. The ears are part of their hair and headpiece, and that can be blended into the face makeup really well, and the end product always looked cool to me. In fact, while waiting to go to the 2020 performance, I drew some of the characters and posted it on Instagram. It was only a few months after making my account, and I got a comment from the guy who was going to be playing the character I drew for the upcoming musical, and he made a comment saying it was cool and it's still something I'm proud of. The original inspiration for the musical was a book of poems from 1939, written by T.S. Eliot, that adapted to a musical by Weber. And originally it was just shown and performed in London, and it takes place in a junkyard, but I went with more of an alley cat theme, since I could still use the trash and stuff. It's only loosely based off the musical, not meant to be accurate. I made the streets cobbled because I felt like that kind of made it feel like historic London. I did them by just doing a bunch of different small gray dots. On first glance and from far away, I think it looks good, although up close, not so much. But it's going to be kind of high off the ground, so it'll have to be looked at from far away anyways, so maybe that's not the biggest deal. I also made a little rat waiter, so I could kind of tie it into my last mouse painting. I also really remember liking the poster they used to advertise cats when I first saw it. The design is simple, it's just 2 cat eyes, but instead of pupils, it's people dancing. I always thought that was a cool and subtle design. This is probably a pretty good test of that new technique, because I feel like this painting has a lot more little details. And I feel like it looks pretty good minus the minor mistakes in the cobblestone street. And I'm finally almost done with the paintings for this top part. This one is definitely one of my favorites so far.